Good day, everyone. This is Teacher Cherry. In this video, we are going to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. This is the fourth and the last method that we are going to learn in solving quadratic equations.
This is by using the quadratic formula. Unlike extracting the square roots and factoring, the method using quadratic formula can solve any form of quadratic equations. Like the completing square, it can solve different kind of quadratic equations. Sa pamamagitan ng quadratic formula, masosolve natin o mahahanap natin ang solutions or roots ng iba't ibang uri ng quadratic equation. So what are you waiting for? Let us learn solving quadratic equations using quadratic formula. In order to solve quadratic equation, the only thing that you need to remember using this method is the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Saan ba nanggaling ang quadratic formula? Ang quadratic formula ay hindi lang basta lumitaw yan. Meron itong origin o pinagmulan.
Alamin natin. Quadratic formula can be derived by applying the method of completing the square. Balikan natin ang method na completing the square. Let's start with the standard form of the quadratic equation. The standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0.
The first step in completing the square is to divide both sides of the equation by a, then simplify. We now have ax squared plus bx plus c all over a equals 0 divided by a. Now have ax squared over a plus b over a x plus c over a equals 0 over a. Ax squared over a is x squared plus b over ax plus c over a equals 0 over a. The second step is to write the equation such that the terms with variables are on the left side and the constant term is on the right side of the equation. We applied subtraction property of equality. We subtract c over a to both sides of the equation. We now have x squared plus b over ax plus c over a minus c over a equals 0 over a minus c over a. We now have x squared plus b over ax equals negative c over a. The third step is to add the square of b over 2 to both sides of the equation. The left side of the equation becomes a perfect square trinomial. Our b is b over a, so we have b over a divided by 2, which is 2 over 1 squared. We get the reciprocal of 2 over 1, which is 1 over 2, and then we proceed to multiplication. We have now b over a times 1/2 squared. Numerator times numerator, which is b times 1, we get b. Denominator times denominator, we have a times 2, we get 2a. We get the square of b, which is b squared. The square of 2a, we have 4a squared. We now have b squared over 4a squared. We will add this to both sides of the equation. Therefore, we have now x squared plus b over ax plus b squared over 4a squared equals negative c over a plus b squared over 4a squared. The fourth step is to express the perfect square trinomial on the left side of the equation as a square of a binomial. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of b squared over 4a squared is b over 2a. Copy the sign of the middle term, which is positive. On the right side of the equation, we get the LCD of a and 4a squared, which is 4a squared. 4a squared divided by a is 4a. Multiplied by negative c, we get negative 4ac. 4a squared divided by 4a squared is 1. Multiplied by b squared, we get b squared. Next step is to solve the resulting quadratic equation by extracting the square root. I-square root natin both sides of the equation. We now have square root of the square of quantity x plus b over 2a equals square root of negative 4ac plus b squared all over 4a squared. Let's simplify. We now have x plus b over 2a equals positive negative square root ng negative 4ac plus b squared, interchange natin. We now have b squared minus 4ac all over square root ng 4a squared is 2a. Solve for x, we apply the subtraction property of equality. We subtract b over 2a to both sides of the equation. We now have x plus b over 2a minus b over 2a equals positive negative square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a minus b over 2a. Let's simplify. We now have x equals positive negative square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a minus b over 2a. And now we interchange. We now have x equals negative b over 2a plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then we simplify. We now have x equals negative b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Yung 2a ay common denominators ng ating fractions. This is now the quadratic formula, and that's how we derive the equation of the quadratic formula. Remember, the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This method, using the quadratic formula, can solve any form of quadratic equations. Kaya kahit anong uri ng quadratic equation, kaya mong isolve, gagamitan mo lang ng quadratic formula. There are 5 steps in solving equations using quadratic formula. Ito yung mga steps na kailangan nating sundin para ma-solve ang equations gamit ang quadratic formula. Step 1 is to transform the given equation into its standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Step 2 is to get the values of a, b, and c. Step 3 is to substitute the values of a, b, and c in the quadratic formula. Step 4 is to simplify the result, and step 5 is to check the solutions by substituting into the original equation. Para maintindihan natin ang mga steps, let's have examples.